the smell of grass and leather. There were days when we'd play too. We'd cross the lines when the sun would shine and make our dreams come true. I had a glove on my hand and a girl in the stands. She stole my heart like a hit and run. It seems the world was so much simpler back then. We was just out there for fun. I pray for someone to hold your hand, and baseball in the summer, someone to walk with you when this world grows cold. Baseball in the summer, baseball in the summer.
There is a sight for sore eyes. Please
only
welcome.
Mother can love.
No, or a teammate that you and I got to play on a few teams together, and between you and your brother, a couple of my absolute favorite people in the entire world. Please welcome to the Brock v. Mac Legendary Rivals podcast, the great second baseman, Larry Houston. I say that, and I know that you're laughing about it, but the truth is, Larry, we played together in Oshawa, and I never saw you play as well as you did at Brock. You were amazing at Brock, so you were great all year. So don't ever hand that back, dude.
Yeah, I feel that too. I played my best ball at Brock, and I think a lot of it was just the steady repetitions too, right? Like it didn't hurt the field we played on. When you can trust the bounces, you're a little more confident playing there. But
that sounds like someone who can. It sounds like someone who can feel.
Too far into this, Polkat, I do want to. I just want to recognize everything you're doing and you have done for the team and the program in the past, and definitely appreciate it. I mean, we're going to spend some time here, but then I kind of walk away for a bit, and you got to do it with everybody else. So I just want to acknowledge that and recognize you for it.
Well, listen, I appreciate it, but I do it because it comes from a genuine sense of love, and we'll be able to get a little more personal in this podcast than others, because you and I knew each other well before there was a Brock, and you and Daryl and Chris and Teddy wasn't. He had already graduated from Oshawa, but you guys were around when I went through all this stuff with my brother. Yeah. And you guys also, had great relationships, in your case, fighting for playing time with him on occasion, but with Brad Reeson. And, one of the main motivators of why we're, getting everyone back together after 30 years, other than, when I started talking to people and first started, banting about this idea of getting a reunion game going, talking to people they hadn't, in some cases, hadn't connected with in over 30 years it became fun real quick. And, and you get a different perspective. I think I got a note from Chris Peters that, he sat through the Jeff Lounsbury podcast, which for Peters is amazing given his general attention span. But, he said he saw Jeff in a totally different light. And so, it's really kind of fun with all of that. But why don't we go way back?
Sure.
Because I think with you, way back means Pontypool and, life really with a very tight family. All of us would have seen your dad coming to games, and, you clearly had a kindred spirit in your we'll joke about how many times people would have thought you were they were expecting identical twins, like with the names Larry and Daryl. You guys are kind of like the folks from Newhart there, but where's your other brother, Daryl? But why don't we start way back when? Tell me about life in Pontypool, and maybe you know, how your love of sports started. We've started with a lot of people that way. But I assume you and your brother must have been hell on wheels when you were young.
Yeah. Yeah, both my parents were into sports. I mean, my dad was a pretty high level fastball player, and my mom had played as well. And it was hockey and baseball. Those were the two sports we played as kids. Growing up in the country, we had over 50 acres of land that we didn't really farm or anything. We just kind of had the land, but we were living off antenna for TV, so TV wasn't an option, and obviously there's no internet or anything back then. So mother was always on us about get outside and play, so we naturally gravitated to playing sports. And so in addition to my brother Daryl, obviously I got a younger brother who's 2 years younger. His name's Brian. But so with three boys relatively close in age, we were constantly playing some level of sport outside. And it's funny because when you're a kid, you don't realize that you're practicing. You're just playing a game. But in essence, like, the games we were playing were just kind of informal practices for us, and it kind of helped us really how we progressed in sport. Like, my dad can attest, he went through quite a few windows in the basement. It was an unfinished basement, so of course that meant hockey time and tennis balls through the window and stuff like that. And then even out back, we would play baseball, and it was almost like a Burby type version of baseball. Set up a sheet of plywood and paint on a strike zone, and of course that moved depending on who was pitching. but yeah, it was it was fun. Like, we didn't have a lot of friends nearby, so it was always the three of us playing. And as you can attest, Daryl and I had our moments where we like to settle things with the fists as opposed to the words.
No.
And, yeah. So yeah, that's what life was like growing up, at least around the house. Yeah, our first baseball was in Orno. That's where we started out playing, and they didn't have a team until my dad and Pete Landers and another guy named Pete Martens kind of put something together. And that's where we met Mike Landers, who you know from the Oshawa days as well. But we were kind of the core three, and we won I think it was a D provincials or whatever, but it didn't matter then, right? You're winning a provincial championship. It doesn't matter what level you're at. As a kid, you just you don't forget it. So yeah, and then we were there till, and I can't for the life of me remember when we moved over, but I want to say it was Bantam maybe that we moved over, or maybe even second year Bantam. I'm not sure, but that's when we moved over to Oshawa and kind of met some of the guys there. So
yeah, it's for those of the people that don't know, Mike Landers was a right-handed pitcher. His dad, Pete, was maybe the most famous windmill softball pitcher in Canada ever. And the thing I remember, yeah, arguably the world. And the thing I remember about Pete was, and still to this day, his left arm is twice the size of his right arm. It's just, it looks like one of those mismatched toys that you have where you pull the arm off of the Hulk and put it onto Ken. It's kind of like a weird thing there. So, what position were you playing early in your career, Larry? Do you remember?
Yeah, I started out as a shortstop. And that's where I played actually right up until we moved over to Oshawa. And that's where I was for that EOBA All-Star team that was put together, and we got to play against the other regions. I was behind Reese the first year, and then when I moved to Oshawa, that's when they slid me over to second base, which was a better fit for me. I didn't really have the arm strength to play short once we got to the 90-foot bases, but yeah, that's where I played. I dabbled a bit at third base, but primarily I was at short when I played in Orno.
Yeah,
I would say maybe one inning that I pitched, and I still remember tried to throw a curveball when I had no business trying, and it hit the lip at the front of the plate and went over the backstop. That's when I knew I probably wasn't going to be a pitcher.
Hey, I did that lots, and you know. So, do you remember who was your first coach in Oshawa? Now, for those people who don't really know, Oshawa, really, really good program at this point. Probably, at that point, I think in time was maybe the best baseball organization in the province because of the dual schedule. We would play EOBA league games, and as we graduated up from into midget and junior, playing a Leaside schedule, the Leaside Metro League as well. Really deep organization. But do you remember who your first coach was there?
I think it was Stoney. I think it was Doug, but I can't remember for sure. I definitely remember Doug and Gramps being coaching, but I don't know if that was my first year there or my second year. I can't remember, but yeah.
It's probably a big adjustment too in terms of park. Okay, one thing we can talk about is in Orono and Kendall. These I heard stories. I never saw it myself, but the lights were lacking. I think maybe in Kendall, and so the parents would park the cars out in the outfield and turn the lights on so you could continue to play. But then you're playing at Kinsman Stadium, which is one of the nicest stadiums in the province.
Yeah, still is, in my opinion.
Yeah, did you kind of have the butterflies the first time you walked in to play?
Yeah, it was, it's called a stadium, but there's really no seating in there, right? So when you first walk, you see it from the outside and you think, wow, this is a stadium. Then you walk in, your first thought is, well, there's not a lot of seating here. This isn't really a stadium. But then you start looking around and you see back then there was still the ivy on the fence. I don't know if they've grown it back or not, but you saw the ivy was there and parts of it, and then you had the clubhouse and the bullpens and all those. Those were all things we didn't have in Orono, right? So then it really started to kind of hit that, hey, this is our home park. Like it's a great feeling. And then when we play pregame warm-ups and have the music going and Hatchie's out there dancing to Montel Jordan and that, like, it's just, and that sounds echoing around the stadium. It was, it was a great feeling playing it.
For the record, he's referencing Dave Hatch, who was another Oshawa lefty, a couple years younger than I was. But Dave is pretty typical of left-handed pitchers in that he inhabits his own world, and dancing in the middle of warm-ups is better than doing it during the game, and he did that at times too. So, but one of the, the talent that was there when you guys probably, I would think in midget, you're starting to see that there are some massively talented players in that system. And the hard part is being at second base. I know from my, 3 years in junior, we had Bobby McGrain, and Brad had hurt his shoulder. So weightlifting, he did something where he crowded the shoulder muscles in the back of his shoulder. So he had to do a lot of DHing and playing second base because he couldn't make the throw from short for a while. And so it was a pretty crowded position, and you're part of the Three Amigos. I remember in my very first year of junior, you guys getting called up to it was a game in Leaside. And
I remember that game actually.
Yeah, because it was not because of you two. It was you and Daryl, but it was because of Mike Landers, who was truly one of the great characters I ever met on a baseball field. But first off, the team had the thing I remember about this, it's hard when you play at Talbot because there's a home run fence in right, where they have a big net and a big fence. So it's kind of like a cheap version of the Green Monster.
That's
and then
left. Yeah, and left.
Yeah, then left. And then in right, there's no fence. There's just
path there that goes
but
on.
I remember the first thing I remember is Mike Landers didn't wear the same socks as everybody. Everyone was wearing those royal blue soccer socks, because we banned stirrups. Just wasn't going to go down that road. But Mike had like these blue dress socks, so he looked horrendous. They were like Pippi Longstocking socks. But he got in a bat late in the game, and he did this huge grunt and hit a home run. And for years afterwards, every time we would see Landers, we would do that same grunt, because that was just a thing with him. He would get all wired up and grunt. But you guys brought speed. First off, you and Daryl were very fast, but also a little bit of an attitude to the game that was really refreshing. You guys were very aggressive, and loved having you as teammates, because it's like having a couple of water bugs out there that would drive the opponents crazy. Our opponents hated playing you, and they hated Landers too, but for different reasons. Tell me what it was like. We'll skip over midget, but now you're playing junior, and your first cup of tea would have been with Gary Minix as the coach, but Ted Stone was on that coaching staff.
Yeah.
And Hugh Walters. So what do you remember about being called up to the big team, and what did that feel like?
Well, anytime you get called up, it's it's a little bit nerve-wracking, right? And everyone seems bigger, fast. Well, everyone was bigger than me, but everyone just seems bigger, stronger, faster, better, right? That's what you kind of feel like. And so the game's moving faster. Pitches seem to be coming in quicker, all of that stuff. And I do remember, actually, it's funny because I've been coaching my son's baseball for 8 years, and for the last, I want to say 5 of them, Gary Minnick's older son, Jack, has been part of my coaching staff. And I do remember that same Leaside game, actually. I was put in at third base, and I faked the guy down because there was a base hit to left, and a guy was coming from second, and I faked him into a slide at third. And I thought the guy was going to tear my head off when he realized what was going on. And from across the field comes Derek Minix, and I thought, okay, it's nice to have this guy on my side. So yeah, he backed me up there, but then when we got in the dugout, it was, he turned on me and said, "Don't you ever do that again, or you're on your own." So, so it kind of, it gave me that kind of message. He's got my back, but I got to be a little bit more smarter with it. So it did relax me, a little bit, having, knowing that, hey, I was really kind of viewed as part of the team, even though I was just some kid being called up, sort of thing. So.
Well, there was a core on that team. So Derek, a guy named Jeff Pickle, and Bobby McGrain and Ryan McBride. They were in their last years, but Derek and Chad Stone, who was not in his last year, but Chad was Ted Stone's grandson. Just a big game pitcher. The guy was great to be. He was a great teammate. And I learned a lot from those guys, just in terms of they really believed in playing the game with some consideration for your opponent. And Derek was talented enough that he could have just did anything on a field. But his dad Gary was worked for the Oshawa Generals as their traveling secretary, the George Costanza role for the Yankees, actually. And Gary was my second coach in junior, and he just had a really defined sense of right and wrong on a baseball field. And so we had kind of a code, like everyone talks about a code in hockey. There was a real code with that Oshawa team that would get transferred from each subsequent generation that would come in, about the way you played, the things we would tolerate and the things we wouldn't. sometimes maybe it was a little bit overbearing because I do recall being a bit of a headhunter on things like, if someone took a wrong step running down the first baseline and nicked the first baseman, or for sure if they rolled through second base and took out one of the infielders, that never flew with us. But other things like being chirpy or excessive bunting, I remember, hitting people with the ball because they bunted at the wrong time. Like that kind of stuff we were hard to play because I think people knew that we were a bit tougher than some of the teams we were playing. And you guys fit in really well with that, you and Daryl, but you were, I think, a little more vocal than your brother. Your brother is pretty quiet.
Yeah. Well, you haven't been around him as much as I have, but maybe it's a relative thing. But yeah, there was never a battle that I didn't want to be a part of, which, still to this day, I'm a little bit more mature and calmer than I was back then, but I still have my moments. So, but yeah, it's definitely, I was seeing Gary would come to some of our games that I was coaching too. And I got to tell you, the first couple of times when he came by, I was very self-conscious about, just coaching the game. Like, is he, am I doing this wrong? Am I doing this, the right way kind of thing? And, that was just kind of the effect that Gary had. So, good solid baseball foundation come out of Oshawa, that's for sure.
Yeah. Well, then, we get to your first real year at junior as a starting player. And we end up with Troy May as a coach. And it's really interesting how we ended up with Troy as a coach, because that started as a result of a brawl in Leaside, or against Leaside, in the Kinsman Stadium.
Yeah.
And I've been in, I think, probably 4 or 5 brawls in my career. Nothing was ever as violent as that one at the stadium. There were fists flying and all kinds of stuff. And I thought I was going to die, because usually as a pitcher, you grab another pitcher and you kind of dance like nothing's going to happen. But Jamie Waters and I got a hold of the catcher for Leaside, who, given his resemblance to King Kong, I think had been chemically enhanced. Let's put it that way.
Okay.
And Troy was coaching Leaside, and they always had Troy worked for a uniform company. So you had the great uniforms, but they had the turtlenecks. That was one thing that they had that nobody else did. And we managed to pull his turtleneck over his head, and we were trying to punch him. And I have one arm and trying to punch him, and Jamie is about my size. Not now, but then he was. I've grown a little bit in the wrong areas. But between the two of us, we're trying to punch this guy, and he ripped his turtleneck. He shook us off. He ripped his turtleneck in half. And I thought, oh my God, we're dead. But then Jerry Brockman, our center fielder, came running in with a forearm shiver and knocked their catcher into the backstop. And it went on, and there was fists and everything. We had a couple of alumni that were in the stands that came down and threatened to get involved with this. Do you remember that brawl? And, remember specifically, it was triggered by Troy May, and we were super pissed at him. I think we all wanted to kill him.
Yeah. I don't remember the specifics. I remember when the whole thing started, I don't know why, but I was somewhere out by shortstop. And that might have been, after I came off the bench or something. I don't remember. I just remember being around shortstop, and, one of the guys, Sean Whiteley, had Troy up against the third base fence and was going to town on him. And I, the rest of it was kind of a blur. And was that the game when he did the 4 or 5 bunts in a row or something like that? Or was that a different game?
No, that was a different game. We'll get there.
Yeah.
No, he said something to Hugh Walters, our third base coach.
Oh, he made a racist comment? Was it?
Yeah, I think it was a little offside.
Okay.
And, I don't really want to the specifics of which are kind of lost in my memory. But what I do remember is Hugh snapped, pushed Troy, and then it just triggered it all. But did you end up throwing punches in the middle of all that, or do you remember that?
No, I don't. Well, I don't remember doing it. I remember, I was one of the younger guys out there, and I just remember that. I just remember that part with Whiteley, and I think a lot of people just stopped to watch that, and then guys jumped in to try and stop that, and then it sort of petered out from where I was. So the stuff that you were into was, as you said, it was obviously down by home plate, so I didn't really see that stuff. But yeah, like anything, I'm sure in the moment it felt like it was like 10 minutes long, and if you look back on it, if you had a video clip or something, it was probably like 30 seconds or a minute.
Yeah, it just felt different than other brawls I'd been in. But the irony of all of this is, in 1995, in 94, we all get called out as veterans of the Oshawa Legionnaires to a meeting in a parking lot at Eastdale, where Jim Lutton was going to introduce our new head coach, and it was the guy that triggered the brawl the year before.
Yeah,
and I remember just being completely in shock, but then I had no idea what we were headed for with Troy May as a coach. And it turns out that he was a pretty good baseball mind, and treated me very well anyway. He didn't, he was hard on some of the team, but that was our year of really playing fully together. And we started that year out 28-0. We didn't lose our first 28 games that year. And, Daryl and yourself were unbelievable sparks for our offense. We were a very good pitching team, but we also could score runs. And, what do you remember about, and Gramps Stone was on that team as the pitching coach and used to throw batting practice to you guys. Do you remember what that was like, especially if you hit one up the box against at that point?
You don't want to shoot the box against Gramps. There's a lot of different things I remember about Gramps, but I think the thing that stood out the most for me with him was I was going through a bit of a struggle at one point. I just didn't feel like I was making solid contact, and he just pulled me aside and he said, meet me at, and I can't remember what school, it was a high school. He said, meet me there tomorrow morning, first thing in the morning on a weekend. And I'm just going to throw you balls until you're comfortable. And that was the kind of guy he was, right? So, and he did, and it wasn't, long after that I kind of broke out of the slump and got going again. But that's what I remember of Gramps, is he's a guy, if you need him, he'll be there, and he'll put the work in for you, as long as you show that you're going to put the work in. He didn't have time for people that didn't have time to work hard, but if you were a hard worker, he was definitely a guy that's going to help you as much as he could.
Yeah. So let's, I won't get into all kinds of specifics about that season because it's not really relevant to Brock, but you and Daryl and Chris and Brad Reeson and a bunch of other people, I remember my brother went got in the car accident in Canada Day and was in Sunnybrook. And I remember my baseball teammates being so important for me. At that point, I was going to the hospital every day, and then one of you, once or twice a week would pick me up for the games that were in Leaside. I stopped practicing, but you guys were just so great, just in terms of being teammates that rallied around and tried to make it as normal as possible, given that my brother was in a coma for 4 months. But that kind of derailed our season a little bit, and we ended up, not going as far as we should have. We had
Mm-hmm.
clearly the best team in the province that year. And, I remember some friendships I have for life came out of that summer. David Hatch, Brad, you and Daryl and Chris and a few others. There was a few others that I was very close with. Scott Smith, the catcher, who was a unique catcher, from that perspective. Most catchers I threw to in my career were salty, kind of like grouchy buggers, and Scott was one of the real thinkers. He would come out, spew an Aristotle type of philosophy your way, and I'm like, I don't really think so. Let's get beyond that. But it was a pretty disappointing result for us to be there, but you guys have an additional year while I'm off at Brock, and eventually we come knocking on your door because we want to recruit you guys. And I remember visiting you first in Oshawa. I think did Coach McRae come to a game in Oshawa to see you guys, and then, or did you guys come to the school first to do? I think it was before Coach McRae, indoor workouts. You guys came to visit the gym.
Yeah, and I don't know if Coach McRae ever came to see me play, because I'd only done maybe a few weeks or so into the season in Oshawa that year, and I'd been moved out to left field because they wanted to get Soupy Campbell playing at second because he couldn't play anywhere else. And I remember I didn't take too well to that, and it was my last year, and I wanted a shot to kind of play and show what I could do. So I ended up going to Hyde Park actually, and played there for a bit. And then so I don't know if I was around when McRae came. I think Daryl stayed, stuck it out, but yeah, I didn't. What
was it like playing for the arch enemy? Truthfully, Hyde Park was our biggest rival for years.
It was weird.
Like?
It was weird. Like, I never felt like I was home, kind of thing, right? And I got moved around a bit as guys started to come back from school. There were some guys that were away at school, and so I got moved around a little bit. I played all over the infield other than first, and but yeah, I just never really clicked with those guys, and yeah. Do I have regrets on leaving Oshawa? I don't know. I wasn't very happy in the situation that I was in there. I felt like I'd earned the opportunity to be the everyday guy, but it is what it is now. So
yeah, I could go into an extended. I mean, I know the player you're talking about. And the previous year, he had been cut and sent to Port Hope.
Mm-hmm.
So Oshawa had kind of a pecking order, so it's weird that they would mess with it that way. But
well, yeah, and what hit me a little bit more was that all-star team. So the first two I played on it for 3 years, and the first 2 years I was behind Reese and Sully, and then that third year was my chance to play, and then the head coach was Dave Bema, who was also the head coach at Port Hope. And the first, you get one guaranteed game playing in the Sky Dome, and then you have to make the championship to play there again. And so guess who got the start on the Sky Dome game? It wasn't me. So I remember being very upset because the same thing. I felt like I put my time in and I'd earned that. And he said, well, it's a right-hand pitcher and he's a left-hand bat. So okay. So I didn't like it, but I accepted it and played. And then when we got to the final, we made the final, and we were playing a team out from Kitchener area. And there was a guy named Todd Thorne on the team who'd been, he was a drafted player, and but he was a left-hand pitcher, and that's who they were going with. And so I got the start, and I think I probably had the game of my life in that game. I tripled off the wall, got a couple stolen bases, dove up the middle, started double play. Like, it was just like it was scripted kind of thing. And we ended up winning. We won that tournament. And so it kind of, of course, was self-fulfilling for me. But, then to go back to Oshawa the next year and kind of lose my job again to the same guy, I think that, that's probably was the salt in the wound for me. So,
well, it's, I know one thing from having played with you and Daryl. Don't give you any extra motivation or it's going to be a long day at the office, right? So I think that is, common for all the Oshawa folks is there's a grittiness there. And, you can kind of make fun of the schwa all you want, but you shouldn't make fun of the players because they'll rip your head off. And so I'm glad that you had the game of your life, and I, the politics of that EOBA all-star team were always complicated, and so interesting to see that you got caught up in it, and we'll kind of address politics a little bit further down the line here. So yeah, I think from my recollection is anyway that we did a recruiting visit with you guys.
Yeah.
And you came up with Chris, your brother, Brad Reeson, who we were trying to recruit. Although Brad had already committed to McMaster, he had already been at McMaster. But I wanted him to come over from McMaster. Thank God he didn't, or else he would have been fighting it out with him, Kasoyan, Simmons, and a cast of thousands for second base. David Hatch tried to get Hatch, but Hatch had committed, I believe, to Canisius at that point. And anyway, you guys came with a big slew of you with Coach Mike Gordensky, I remember. And Todd and I remember sitting down with you guys in Isaacs, and I said to him, that's the perfect place to recruit the Houstons. Bring them to a pub. Do you remember what went into the decision to come to Brock?
So even though I was a year younger, I was actually a year ahead in school. So I had switched over to, I'd gone to school at Windsor to start. And Daryl did the victory lap. So he was still doing his last year of high school when this whole thing started, the recruiting side. And Windsor didn't have a baseball team. And just at first the thought of, getting to play baseball was, and go to school was very appetizing to me. And, seeing the guys that were, kind of in the mix to go there was even more encouraging. And, obviously going to Brock is closer to home as well. So there was a lot of those different things, that came into play. But to me, it felt like it was going to be, a program worth being a part of, and not just, some, fly by night thing where you're just gonna, play 6 or 7 games and, say you played college baseball sort of thing. And that I think it was in that visit you were talking about playing some of the U.S. schools and things. And I remember just that whole idea of, getting to go down there and test yourselves against some of the, the higher level schools was just, to me, it was, okay, where do I sign kind of thing. So that's what all that stuff together kind of really got me excited about coming.
Yeah, I had forgotten, it's funny what 30 years will do. I had forgotten that you were at Windsor. I always thought that Daryl maybe had gone to Windsor after his the year at Brock, but no, that's right. You were, and what drove the decision for you to, get a house in Thorold, not far from the thank God it wasn't too far from the practice field there. But you lived in a house with Chris Peters and your brother, and I think maybe JJ. Was it JJ or Simon? I can't remember which one. Yeah. Why did you guys decide to live together?
Well, for me, because I'd already done the residence thing, I was kind of, more interested in getting a house, um, and Daryl and Peters were on board, and JJ just kind of tagged along. So that's where that kind of started out. Was let's at first it was just the three of us. Let's find a place sort of thing, and then we settled there. I was a little bit ticked with Peters and JJ because we were the ones that kind of kicked it all off, and then they snuck down day earlier than us, and Peters took the whole basement as his bedroom, and JJ took the master bedroom. So we got the two smaller bedrooms. But I should have known better. I should have known those guys would have done that. But
that doesn't
make it
seem
interesting because Daryl and I shared a car. So when we had different course schedules, we'd be kind of going to the school together, even if we didn't have to. And sometimes that didn't always go well. There's a few holes in the wall that have probably been patched up by now, but
well, it's that part is hilarious. So we'll get into how you guys would mediate disputes a little bit later. I'm sure Peter's kind of related when I recorded him that there was a few holes in the wall from a couple of robust arguments. But do you remember who the first coach was that you talked to?
No, I don't actually. I don't remember a lot of the visit when we went down there. Frankly, I do remember being at the pub, but and I remember talking with people, but who they were, I can't for the life of me remember who they were. I don't know if you remember this, but I was actually originally asked to come down as an outfielder. So when I first went to we did that 1 week training camp tryout type thing before school started. And I was told to go out and take some fly balls in the outfield. So I took a couple, and I was never comfortable as an outfielder. And I'm pretty sure it was you who went to McRae and said, maybe have him take some ground balls. And I went in, and whatever I did was enough for him to say, yeah, you're going to play in the infield, because just a handful of ground balls, and all of a sudden now I was an infielder. And so I do remember, McRae early on. But that was, like I said, once we'd already started the on-field stuff.
Yeah, the thing I remember, and I don't remember having it, it's not likely I would have had a conversation with Coach McRae about players, although I did give them a pretty good, obviously we were active in recruiting Oshawa and Metro League players to the team, and I would have given them a pretty damn good scouting report on the Oshawa guys that were coming in, and some of the other Metro League players that I would have played against, and we tried to, bring on board. But the one thing I do remember very early was Coach Kemp pulling me aside and saying to me, I love these Houston boys. I just, I think you guys were cut out of the same cloth. That Daryl appreciated the competitiveness and just, you guys are great teammates. So, you need a little fire, a little spice to make it, to make the engine go. So do you remember what your first dealings with Coach Kemp were like?
I don't remember first dealings with him, but I remember I loved how simple he made things, right? Like his conversations with you would always simplify the game for me. And I remember being in awe of him at first because, this is a guy that played pretty high level baseball, the highest level baseball that I'd been around as a player, other than Gramps, of course. But and I don't know if this story is true or not, but there was a game where someone told me afterwards that Kemp had some Blue Jay scouts coming to watch me play, and probably some others too. But there's a guy took me out with a dirty slide into second, and my dad always taught me that if they're going to take you out, you make sure they feel it too. So I made sure my elbow landed in a place he didn't like too much, and So then he got up and shoved me, and the next thing I know, we're both kicked out of the game in like the second inning. So I just remember walking off the field, and Kemp was kind of like, "Thanks, kid." But yeah, I mean the Kemp, you know, when we were in Cooperstown, and you know that moron was shooting BBs at bots, and I remember I don't know if it was Tanish that said like someone's shooting at us, and I think it was Kemp that yelled out, "If someone's shooting at you, you're allowed to call time." So he just like he had that I don't know, he had a calming presence about him.
Yeah. Do you remember what it felt like at that training camp? There were a lot of players, and like I don't think anyone other than Coach McRae likely had any insight into the fact that it was going to be a very competitive camp, and it there was tons of great players at it, so it was hard to make the team. Do you remember what it felt weird? Because we had already gone through a cut down, and we had no idea how many great players were going to show up. Do you remember what it was like at training camp? How you felt?
Yeah. I remember when I first got there, I was excited, and then I saw all those bodies, and I was going to the outfield, and I thought, man, I've moved schools, and I might not even make this team. Like that was kind of the first thought that went through my head, and once I moved into the infield, and I got a sense that things were going to be good for me. After that, I remember thinking, this must be what it's like at the bigs, because you had it was like a week-long training camp, and we were there first thing in the morning till I don't know 4 or 5 o'clock at night. I can't remember how long it was, but it was full days, and it was just thinking, wow, this is my first real experience of like a spring training type atmosphere, and it was amazing. So yeah, definitely an emotional roller coaster at first, but yeah, once I knew my spot was kind of comfortable, then yeah, I was just soaking it all in.
Yeah, it's good to hear. Do you have and I like to dispel this because it kind of makes everybody laugh. I've spoken for years about playing with the Houston twins, but everyone, I think, kind of naturally assumes that you and Daryl are identical twins, and you're not. You're actually the oldest, and you point that out to him every moment that you can. How long has that gag been going on? Your entire life?
Well, no, we are twins. We're fraternal twins, but I've got a full 3 minutes on them, so I'm quite a bit wiser than them.
I was going to say that 3 minutes might as well be 30 years from the way I've heard it. Now, I'm going to say something that I remember, and I don't know whether any of our teammates will remember this, but we get to the end of training camp, and I think a whole bunch of us went out to Smart Alex, maybe just to celebrate making the team and stuff. And this is where I remember where you had these shoes where the shoelaces were out of it. Do you remember why you didn't have shoelaces in your shoes, Larry Houston? Because you told me why.
Was that back to my Windsor days?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Well, let's just say I spent a night in a place that they don't let you keep your shoelaces in. Or a belt.
Well, listen, I'm no saint when it comes to that, because I can vividly recall you pushing me home to the place in Thorold from front in a shopping cart. So that goes to show you that those in glass houses shouldn't throw stones. But
yeah, no, I it's funny because I've never told my parents, so if they watch this, they're gonna know. But yeah, it was one of those things where I think my dad knew something was up, because a few weeks after he got a phone call. I guess something had happened in another room, let's call it, down the hall from me, and so they wanted witnesses. So my dad's like, Any idea why this officer's calling me? I may have witnessed something. I don't know. But he left it alone, so.
That's good. So we get into the season, and do you recall what you remember during the season? It was we were it was pretty intense, and you were just having a great season. From what I remember, I'd never seen you play that great. For consistently, you were consistent all year long. But are there things that stand out during the season that you remember?
It's funny when I played in Oshawa, I never really pulled the ball much. I was always a drive the ball to right field kind of guy, and it was McRae actually who took me aside at one point and said, you've got power to right, but you're not getting to those inside pitches. You're inside outing them. And so he did a drill where he set the tee up to my left and had me facing, kind of away from it. So I had to do full rotation to hit the ball. And then all of a sudden I started pulling the ball, and that gave me a ton of confidence at the plate, because I thought now those inside pitches are ones that I'm gonna be able to do some damage with. And I think on the fielding side, playing at Stomper Stadium definitely helps from the mental side of things, where you're confident you're always going to get a good bounce, so you're not worried. It's not that part of you that's thinking, oh, where's this ball going to kick kind of thing, which is what you get in some of the parks I grew up with for sure. But and I definitely think that playing consistently, like we were on the field a lot, whether we're practicing almost every day, and then playing the doubleheaders on the weekends. So when you're in a bit of a groove, the more you play, obviously the better it is to stay in that groove. On the other side, if you're in a slump, it just feels like it never ends when you're on the field all the time. But yeah, I definitely having the confidence of the coaching staff in me, and hitting in right behind Bots there, definitely just really helped with the confidence for me. And I think anybody's a better player when they're confident. So just really enjoyed the season, and that, like you said, that there's that fire in me that just wants to beat the best if we can. So going down to play those D1 schools and JUCOs and things like that in the States, it always just drove me a little bit more to want to be better.
We had a pretty good rivalry with U of T, where a couple of our, I think your High Park teammate Mike Loretto was,
we got
Elliot. Yeah, Elliot Lou. Like these are some high end lefties that they had. So we needed you to be great. Oh, and here's a really difficult question, because I'll ask it of your brother. You're having a great year, and I had seen your brother's act for a few years. He didn't have such a great year. He was hurt. Mm-hmm. And was that tough on Daryl? And what kind of things were you saying to try to pick him up? Because I know he's hard on himself, more so than you are, actually. And Daryl could get really into his own head. What do you remember about Daryl's struggles during the year, actually?
Yeah, so Daryl got picked, I think it was North York. They won the provincials or something. I think they got called or he got called up to play with them in nationals or some tournament. I'm not sure. And just before we were to come down, and I think he was stealing a base or something. And when he slid into second, he rolled an ankle. And I might be off on the fine details, but it was something with an ankle that he did on a slide in that tournament. And so right just before coming into camp, he's got a bum leg, and a lot of his game was built on his legs, right? Whether it's tracking balls down the outfield or on the bases and whatnot. So to take that away from him really, put him behind the eight ball. And we had an outfield with Tanish, Bottomley, and Zuziak in left, and Daryl just before he was ready kept trying to push himself to prove himself, and he just physically couldn't do it, and wouldn't give himself the time to heal, and so that started to compound with him because he knew what kind of player he could be if he was healthy. And because he couldn't be that player, it was really, I could feel it eating away at him. And I remember trying to talk to him about just, it is what it is, man. You just got to give yourself time to heal. Stop trying to go when you're not ready yet. But, he's stubborn, bullheaded, and I think that's part of what drives him too. And what makes him a good player is having that part of him that, drives him like that. I mean, this is a guy that played in the Ontario junior team, and he made some highlight reel catches in the Dome, and he was an elite defender. And for him to just realize, hey, I should be out there on that field, and I can't do it. It obviously was tough to watch as his brother.
Yeah, it was, I think, hard for all of us. From that perspective, because, I knew, kind of what, I think Coach Kemp saw it for sure. He came to me about your brother a little bit, but it's different when you've got a relationship with your actual brother. And, so I'm glad that you were able to be there with him, but it didn't affect your game at all. You're performing at a great level. What was your relationship like, obviously playing second base, but you're always going to be closest to the other middle infielders. What do you remember about Steve Vatour? You would have had to have been the middle of the infield quite a bit with him.
Yeah, I remember he had a incredible arm. And he was just, he was another one of those guys where you just want to have in battle with you. But it's funny because I think I was closer with Hoover, who was over at third, than I was with whether it was who else was at short.
Well, there's Ryan Thompson, there was Mark Kasoyan, and Brian Simmons. Those are basically the infielders there.
Yeah. So
you're closer. Yeah. You were closer with Jeff Hoover.
Well, I remember when we would have infield practices and stuff, I'd be talking more with him than I would be with the other guys, which is not, like you said, not normal. Usually the middle infielders are kind of glued at the hip, but maybe it was because there was we seemed to be going through. We didn't really have a set everyday shortstop. It felt right when, especially with Boucher coming into pitch too. Maybe that's what it was. I don't know. Didn't Joel play there a bit too?
No, Joel was just straight pitcher, but
okay. There's someone else that played there.
I think you might be thinking Ryan Thompson, but
yeah, maybe. I don't know. It's been 30 years. I can't remember all that stuff. But
me either. But as the year progresses, we travel to some pretty exotic locations. Any of those stand out? I think most people will bring up Cooperstown or St. Bonaventure.
Yeah.
I know it was special for us going back and winning the Durham tournament because of Sam Dempster and some of our old teammates playing on Durham College. But get anything that stands out before we get to nationals, just in terms of...
Sure. Yeah, so Bonaventure, of course, right? Like you driving into that stadium and you see the history. I think it was it Joe McCarthy or something? His name's up on the dugout. One of the old time managers from out of there, and but I remember at Bonaventure, it wasn't a great start for me there because in the pregame warm up, I got stung by a bee. I took some water from a water bottle. I sprayed it on the ground to get some mud to rub on it, and I put the water bottle back down. I rubbed it on, and then I went to take a drink, and I grabbed a different water bottle apparently, and it was someone's spit cup. I took a swig of that, and I'm thinking, man, what else could go wrong here? But I remember, that was a school, another D1 school, right? That and we were right there with them. We almost beat them that one game.
Yeah, if not being shanghaied by the umpiring, which Coach McRae correctly pointed out. But you guys were playing a guy that we had seen in Vance Kosher
Ajax,
Ajax, and he didn't have his greatest start against us. Mm-hmm. Let's put it that way. It's interesting in retrospect. Sometimes when we would have seen people, we figured them out a little quicker than some of the unknowns. But I think what I've picked up in the early podcasts anyway is everyone. You get one of two opinions, that we were really struggling against the D1 schools, which we had a couple of horrific results. But then when we would get our act together, we're pretty competitive in those games. And it would usually be a play here or a play there, or one facet of the game maybe not being up to snuff. And there certainly was a little bit of a difference in the depth. But, the games against McMaster, U of T, the higher-end Canadian teams were also pretty intense because they had great players. Mm-hmm. People forget that the McMaster team had, a guy I played with, Bill Newton, but they had Cooper, they had Doug Lunny pitching, they had Reese sitting in the middle of that lineup, which is no bargain. Mm-hmm. U of T had the left-handed pitchers. It was no guarantee that we were going to, even advance to the national championships. And then we get there, and we start with a Dalhousie team that the next year would win the entire thing. The competition was way better in Canada than I think any of us thought it was going to be. Yeah. I mean, you take out the George Browns of the world, which we kind of laugh at a lot, but take out the George Browns and maybe the Guelph. Guelph was not very competitive. We somehow almost lost to them. But there were a lot of really high-end players playing in Canada at that point.
Yeah. It was, coming into this, I didn't really know what it was going to be like, which I'm sure all the guys were kind of feeling some of that too, right? That, what's this team league going to be like? And, it's funny when you talked about Oshawa, where we had that double schedule, kind of same thing at Brock, right? So we got a taste of both Canadian baseball and the US baseball. And I remember we, even some of the JUCOs we played were pretty solid teams. Wasn't really much to choose from with the D2 schools, but the D1 and the JUCOs were pretty good. Well, obviously the D1s were good, but I remember the first game. I'm not sure if it was Niagara, but the leadoff hitter hits a 2-hopper ground ball to me at second, and I played it like I normally do, sat back on it, and the guy beat it out. Like it was a routine play, and I thought, oh my God, the speed is that much better. Next time up, the guy did the same thing. I was ready for it, and I threw him out. But I just remember that was kind of an eye opener. That hey, this is different ball here.
It's what I will say is it's deep in the mechanics. The thing I would watch would be pitching mechanics all the time, and there's a consistency there, right? There's a consistency of. I always used to joke the Americans were always big, tall, right-handed guys that threw a fastball and a slider. And, in Canada, you would have weird arm angles, and you'd have a lot of fastball curveball guys. And so just nuances, differences, and it took a little bit of a pass to get adjusted to it. Interesting from that standpoint. We'll kind of, I think, maybe skip over nationals unless there's anything from the nationals that really stand out for you. We've talked about it with other people. Got anything that we need to address there? It was colder than hell, but
yeah, I remember it snowed. Just before we got there, it was snowing. I remember my dad, because my dad made the drive in there to watch, and I remember, I just remember, I was like a riverboat gambler, right? There wasn't a base I couldn't steal, and I remember being at third. Don't remember the guy's name that was pitching from Laval, but he was that big lefty that I think he'd played A-ball somewhere, and he was going full wind up, and we're down a run, and I remember I was having this, internal battle of steal home, you can do it, versus you don't want to be the third out trying to steal home. And I never, I think it was a ground ball, the short end of the game. And I just remember like that, what if I'd taken off, but yeah, I remember it was really heartbreaking. That was a crushing way to lose. We were that close to being the national champion. So that's the part that kind of stood out. It was a long drive back from Montreal, that's for sure.
Well, as I've said this before, but I think our championship ring comes as a result of having survived and laid a foundation for a winning program and in life. So, why don't we talk a little bit about what happens after? What's the decision? Where do you go? What does your life start to look like immediately the day after we get back from Montreal?
Well, once we got back and baseball kind of stopped, I realized how much I really didn't like the program I was in for school. When I started school, the plan was to be a lawyer. I was going to go through history and then law school. And, being a transfer student, I learned you're at the bottom of the barrel in terms of course selection. I was picking last for second year courses. Like there was, second year majors are picking. There was third, fourth year guys that needed courses. And then others were even ahead of me. So I was getting the last pick of courses, and I got some really bad courses. So that didn't help things. And then you got that baseball hangover where you used to be in a park almost every day. And, so I started really questioning whether, do I really want to go through this many years of school? And, do I really want to be a guy pushing paper all the time as a lawyer? I wasn't sure that was going to be the right thing for me. So originally it was just take a year off. And then my dad got me in contact with a guy he used to play ball with and work with. So I started out just working in, the manufacturing industry. And, first I worked for the summer at Home Depot just to kill time. But, then I got into manufacturing, and, it's one of those things where, it just was just something to do. And I tried to figure out what I wanted to do next. And so did that for a while. And then, then that's where I met my wife. She started working there. And, I remember her first couple of days. I was in charge of the warehouse, and I had to give her a tour of the place. And, she was in trouble ever since then. But so, then we were working, and then we got married, and we settled in Whitby first. So we got married in 2002. Settled in Whitby. We had our first of two boys was born in 2006, and then our second one was in 2008. And we started thinking, it was a starter home that we had. This wasn't really where we wanted to settle for good. So we wanted to settle for good, where before our oldest started school, so we didn't have to move them. And so I was working in Markham, and we had a bunch of friends in Markham. So we started looking here, and we ended up finding a place here, and we've been here ever since. As far as jobs, I was, worked in the manufacturing world for right up until I think 2005, and I realized that I wanted to start working for myself. So I think it was Joel that was talking about, he was a financial advisor, financial planner. Well, I got into that, and I did that for about 5 years, and almost 5 years. Then that asset-backed commercial paper crash happened in 2009, and at that point I had a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old, and really no business coming in because people just weren't looking to buy. So I ended up selling that business, and my in-laws own, my wife's Vietnamese, and her family owned a couple of Vietnamese restaurants. So at the same time as all that was going on, my father-in-law asked me if I'd wanted to help them run one of them while they opened another one, and so I said sure. So I spent a year as a kind of the lead manager of a Vietnamese restaurant, believe it or not. But then I realized I never saw my family. It was 6 days a week, and I was out of the house by 9 and home by 11:30 at night. And then, Sundays I'd have off, and of course I just want to lay on the couch and watch football. And my wife wanted to pack in a week's worth of time with me and the kids into one day. So just wasn't really working. So went back into the manufacturing world, and I stayed in there until recently we went through a sale of our company, and I decided I didn't really like the new ownership group, so I took a package out of there. But so I'm kind of in between right now, but yeah, that's what life has been like for me. Been coaching since my son was first started playing house league baseball. I've coached his baseball team, and so I took it all the way up to 15U Elite, which was last season. And then I just decided to take a step back. The elite programs, for those that are been involved with them, they're taking on a life of their own now, and it's a bit of that perfect world, or perfect game type world, where it's just everyone's got to outdo the next guy for. You got to be you got to be practicing four or 5 times a week in the off season. It gets to be a bit much. And I just decided, I'm going to spend more time with the family. So still coaching them in hockey, but this will be the first summer coming up that I haven't been coaching baseball in 8 or 9 years.
When you have the DTs and you're shaking, I'll just, come and play a little, clip of the sound of a bat crack or whatever. It's
the best part is I can go watch now, and I can just leave when the game's not a good one. I can just leave.
Well, it's admirable that you make decisions for quality of life, Larry. That it's not something that a lot of people are left with, and we're going to get into some heavy subject matter here now, because I think it's appropriate, because we both know. So we mentioned earlier that Michael Landers was a teammate of ours, and I think to meet Mike is to always know Mike. He just was one of those guys that had the big smile and would give you his shirt off of his back all the time. And I took a real special. He was maybe one of the first people where I legitimately tried to mentor someone. When you guys were on the Oshawa junior team, the other pitchers and I were friends, and we all respected each other, but there was always that competition for mound time. So, the younger guys always wanted, my starting slot, and I was never going to give that up, and nor did I want to teach them, how to come get it. So,
yeah.
But Mike was a guy that I took under my wing a little bit, because I felt that he had this impossible shadow to live up to, right? His dad was, I think it's in the Guinness Book of World Records for being, maybe, yeah, you're right. Other than, he was going to take over, is that guy's Eddie Fainter?
Eddie Fainter.
Yeah, he was going to take over that, because He was the best windmill pitcher in the entire world. And Mike had a hard time living up to that. I think as a baseball pitcher, he was a bulldog of a competitor, and he would try, but sometimes he would get in his own way a little bit. And, I saw a kid that I just loved his attitude. So I would try to help him out where I could. And more so, we would talk a lot on the, when I wasn't pitching, because I'm not talkative when I pitch, but I would talk to him about, go see Gramp Stone about this, or throw the ball inside more. That was always something I was telling him to do. But, he's a genuinely great guy. And, we lost him. That's maybe just over a year now, maybe a year and a bit. Because it's something that people don't talk about, which is particularly, most people wouldn't know that mental health for men in particular, between the ages of about 40 and 60, suicide and things related to it, second leading cause of death, 320% more occurrence than with women. And, Mike had suffered some setbacks in life, and but kept that smile of his and that generous spirit. But I don't think anyone knew he was suffering to the extent that he was. And I ran into him about a month before he passed in a drugstore in Orono. And, it was our typical conversation, just friendly, and it's great to see him. I told him maybe we should play catch or something that summer. And, unfortunately, a casualty of mental health and the things that go with it. We all learn from these things, but what did you learn from, the premature passing of Mike?
So, my brother and I and Mike, we were, like you said, the three amigos, or whatever you called us, the three stooges maybe. But we, I went to school with Mike when we were younger, but we were, primarily we were around mostly each other on the ball field. And yeah, we played in Orono together. We went, to Oshawa together. And I even played, when I went back after I was all said and done playing, I went back and played senior ball in Kendall with them for a few years. And, Mike was the ultimate gamer. Like, there wasn't, I've never played with any other pitcher that, he had nothing left, but he was still going to tell you he's got everything left. Like, and you could see him just hanging, everything's hanging, and he's still out there, battling. He just wouldn't give up. Mike was always the life of the party too. And, sometimes that was one of the lessons I got, is sometimes the loudest and, biggest presence in the room might be the one that's also dealing with the most. It's more like a defense mechanism sort of thing. I'd lost touch with Mike for quite a few years, actually, once we moved into Markham. But ironically, he, in our Kendall days, we were rivals with Markham. And we were the two teams that are always battling it out. And the center fielder on the Markham team was a guy named Matt Wagner. And Mike ended up jokingly saying to him he was going to, marry his sister. And when you know what he actually did. So, yeah, you can just imagine how that went over at first. But then when I moved to Markham, I started playing, where all us old ball players go, usually, is a slow pitch. And when you know it, Matt Wagner was the guy that recruited me to come play. So I still kind of kept up with what was going on with Mike through Matt. And, there's a couple of times where I'd seen Mike, he'd be in town. So we'd go Jake's here in Unionville, and just have a couple of drinks. And he was the same old guy. Like, nothing had changed with him. And it was Matt that actually reached out to me. It's just over 2 years now, believe it or not. Matt had reached out to me to let me know, and it was just, I couldn't believe it. That one rocked me. Like you said, there's same thing. I've lost a few people that from my youth that had their demons and couldn't overcome them. But this one with Mike, I just, it was tough, even though, and I felt, you go through that guilt phase, right? Where you're like, maybe if I'd kept in touch with him more, there's all those different things you can think of, but you can't let it now spiral on you too. So, and it was so tough. Like I didn't even go to any of the services for him, or there was a few things I wanted to go to, but it conflicted with baseball, ironically, coaching. But yeah, I haven't been back to see Pete or like his dad or any of the other guys, and I'm still not sure if I'm ready to, frankly.
So I've had 3 ex-teammates and 2 people I went to school with, kind of under the same circumstances, all about 50, 51, 52. Typically going through a divorce or some sort of trauma, job loss, and the one thing I've learned is it's kind of correlated to a testosterone drop. Like, men go through a point where they have some changes in their testosterone levels, and there's lots of publicity and information out there, and hormone replacement therapy for women who are going through menopause. But I think it's typical of men that they don't talk about stuff, and they don't really share information well, because we talk about stupid stuff when we get together. Generally, like, we'll talk about, whether the waitress was cute, or whether the Jays should trade for this starter or that starter. But, I think if there's anything that we can be self-aware of, it's that, we should always check in, because we just don't know. And it's something that men of our age need to be aware of, that there's other things that contribute than just going through some things. There are some physiological changes. There are some chemical changes that can create a heightened risk for these things. So, that sat with me for a few years about Mike, because I still see the goofy kid who didn't care that he was wearing blue, I swear to God, they're like Pippi Longstocking socks, or that he would grunt and just be this force of nature, and tons of fun. He was super fun to have as teammate, because you could rag on him all day long and he wouldn't care. But you're right, he was also a great competitor. He was a guy, it was a bulldog. And, I wish I could have taught him, in retrospect, a 2-seam fastball, because it's the one weapon he needed. But you couldn't ask for a better teammate. But he, talking to you, just reminded me that this is something we should address, because we're kind of uniquely qualified to probably talk about it, given how close you were with Mike all the way through. And he was kind of like a right-handed. We always Hatch and I used to call Landers an honorary lefty, because he was so strange. Yeah, he was just so wired, so strange. So, so we'll get on to some lighter subject material here. So you got a great family. You've done a lot of coaching. You've played some slow pitch. It kind of seems to be par for the course for all of us. You got anything that you really want to get accomplished moving forward, Larry? Like, are you are you going to become a lion tamer now that you've got a chance to reassess your career again? Going to go
No,
back to the restaurant agent?
I think I'm at a bit of a crossroads here too, because in my where I'm at right now is I did a lot of client services is what my main role was in in the manufacturing world as I got to that point, and frankly, I'm not sure that's something I'm excited about doing anymore. So I've been doing some soul searching on what I want to do next, and one of the things I've looked at is putting in a baseball facility here in Markham to have a place for kids to work. But the problem with those is they don't make money. Like you get a short season for them where you can do okay, but after that, what do you do? So, like we actually, ironically, maybe not ironically, but McBride's facility is one of the ones we used when I was coaching. He's got a facility up here in Richmond Hill. So, what the next step, obviously is getting the kids off to school and getting them on their path. But, for us, we're doing okay. So, I just thinking, what's the next step? I'd like to do something that is involved with sports, but, something I could do beyond retirement age too, at least in some capacity. So that's kind of where I'm at, but who knows if it'll work out.
Well, there may be a few of us, and this is another lesson that I'm learning. There may be a few of us that own companies that are tied to sports. Teddy has a great company called Kidspired, where he brings in third-party sponsors into minor sports. I do crazier things, like my afternoon was spent negotiating a drone show involving Despicable Me over the city of Toronto. So, that's just such a pull-tat thing to do, really. But, I think, Rob Green and I talk about this all the time. Rob is CEO and president of his own company that he built from his hands up. And, it seems now is an appropriate time for teammates always look after each other. So I'm sure this will come quickly to you, but there's lots of resources and people that are tied to our old baseball program that may have some options, Larry, because it's the same thing, in life, that recipe for success. If someone goes in, high to second base, I would have been the first guy to hit that cracker in the ribs, or worse, knowing me, because we stand up for each other. That's what teammates do. So to circle back, do you remember what your dealings were like with Coach Lounsbury?
Yeah, it's funny. I don't remember much of dealing with Lounsbury. I don't know why. I had fond memories of him, but I don't know why. When there's only a couple of times where I've actually been in contact with him since we played, but I ran into him one time down in Niagara Falls or Niagara in the Lake. I don't remember where I was, but it was somewhere down that way, and I remember calling him up for some help on how to get my parents across the border in my car so they didn't get arrested for driving a stolen vehicle. But yeah, no, I don't remember much of a lot of the interactions with the coaches during the season. I remember more interactions with Coach McRae than I do with any of the other guys, believe it or not. And half of those were because usually they were on the end of something I had done or someone had done to me. So, yeah.
Is there, after 30 years, are there a few people that you're really looking forward to seeing that, you and I have seen each other since then, and obviously, I don't know whether everyone knows that your brother Daryl is out on the West Coast, but
Yeah.
is there people that you think about from time to time that you haven't seen in 30 years that you're looking forward to seeing?
I'm just looking forward to seeing all the guys. Like it's, it takes something um, like this to kind of force me to reconnect with people. It's something I'm not very good with. I've lost touch with a bunch of the guys that I grew up with too from back home because they're only an hour drive away, but it's just easy to get caught up in the day to day, and so just this whole idea. When you first reached out a couple years ago, I was excited and there wasn't a particular guy that I was excited to see. It was just the chance to be around the guys again and to just kind of but I think between the group of us with 30-year gap, we can kind of put a bunch of pieces together of things that we all half remember and come up with a good story. But that's kind of more what I'm excited about.
Yeah, there are some crazy stories. I mean, I feel bad because I've mentioned the Birdman of Meriton a bunch of times, and a few people will know what that is all about because I've told that story a little bit. But I certainly in this episode, I can't believe I've outed you for your stint in the drunk tank, and worse than that, I don't know how I fit in a shopping cart, but I remember that there were a lot of fun nights at Front 54. And I think, you guys were the base camp for our Front 54 excursions because you guys lived in Thorold and I'd drive my car there
Yeah.
and then park it clearly. But I do remember this, and this is something I remember very specifically. And I think it was you and Daryl and Chris Grucci and Chris Peters were with me. There were a bunch of baseball players at Front 54. And we were all dancing on the dance floor. And there was a girl dance. Yeah, it was kind of like a pit, but there was a girl dancing right near us, and her some guy came walking out on the dance floor and hit her over the head with a beer bottle. I remember that, and we all kind of we were a lot of us were wearing those gray Brock baseball T-shirts, but we grabbed the guy and we were attempting to punch him. So it was like all of us trying to kill this guy. But Front 54 had those triplets, those three identical. They looked like Sylvester Stallone, but with like long, stringy hair. And I remember they threw all of us baseball players off. And one guy put that guy in a full Nelson, lifted him off the floor. His feet were off the floor. And the other guy, like rabbit punched him about 30 or 40 times. And they threw him out the front door. And at 2:00 in the morning, when we were all drunkenly stumbling back to your place, that guy was still laying out there. I remember that like that was yesterday. And I thought, wow, I thought the baseball team would have done some damage to him if we would have, gotten our hands on him fully. But those bouncers, I was like, okay, I'm not going to misbehave at Front 54. Those guys will do that to me probably. But
Yeah,
lots of good times with outside of school, right? Like people forget that there were lots of good nights at Isaac's. There were lots of good nights at Smart Alex. If you say the name Gourds and Shooters, people will remember what that is. And, with my daughters now in university, it's not the same. It's not the same experience. This generation doesn't do things quite the same. We would do a lot of things as a pack. There were 6, 8, 10 of us that would go out together. We would, go to the gym together. We would hang together. And I remember a lot of those times because my time on the field was not like that. You're a pitcher.
Mm-hmm.
Pitchers are their own thing. It's kind of a private experience, and you either do it or you don't. If you don't, you're going to hang your head in shame. And if you do, you get a lot of the glory. Not appropriately sometimes. You get too much of it because, you guys got to pick up the ground balls or whatever. None of us have ever I've never seen anyone strike out 27 batters in a game or any of that kind of stuff. But yeah, I remember those unique, weird moments of you pushing me down the road in a shopping cart, or I remember Daryl, your brother Daryl, Brad Reeson, Chris Peters, and I went out in St. Catharines. You weren't there. I don't know why. It was maybe after all the baseball and you had left school. But we went into, and I'll bring this up with Daryl, but we went into a pizza after a night of drinking, and Daryl got into it with a guy because he was wearing a shirt that said "Tap a Keg of Beer." And for some reason, Daryl thought that was the funniest thing ever and was laughing and pointing at the guy's T-shirt. He took great offense to this. And you know what your brother's like. I always found that you were more fiery all the time. Daryl was not so fiery, and then when the fuse flipped, though, it was bad. And that guy started poking your brother in the chest, and I said to the guy, "You don't want to do that, because if he loses it, you'll be dead." So I was big and tall, so I thought I'll threaten the guy instead. And maybe he'll leave your brother alone, because I know that if your brother hits him, it's going to be far worse than if I just stand there and look imposing. And, between the four of us and that guy and his three friends, we got into a little fracas in the streets of St. Catharines. But I kept your brother out of jail, essentially, is what happened.
I needed you in Lindsay.
Yeah, it's like... just fun stuff like that you couldn't get away with now. But, Larry, I think it'll be fun to see you interacting with Jeff Hoover or Kasoyan and Simmons, who we all have lots of fun memories about. So we're looking forward to it. Got anything that you feel that lasted with you your entire life that you picked up at Brock?
Besides some of the baseball stuff that I learned there, one of the things to me, I remember at the time, I wouldn't say hated it, but I didn't like the fact that, here we are, a university baseball team, and we're out doing fundraising stuff all the time and having to go and wear our jerseys and try and drum up money and stuff like that. But really, as you get older, you kind of reflect on that stuff, and there's a sense of pride there to know that, that team put in the, kind of the work and the, not just off the field, of course. And a lot of that was driven through guys like you and that, but, just laying that foundation as a team to kind of help that program grow to what it is and what it's become. And, that's something that, when people ask me whether I played ball anywhere, the first thing I talk about is I played, university ball at Brock, and we were like the first year of the program, kind of thing. That's something that's, no one could ever take away from any of us. So
that's great to hear that. I mean, look at least we didn't have to do the old electronics recycling thing that every hockey team and baseball team does. I've done a few of those.
Any pepperettes or
yeah. So it's that's great, Larry. Thank you so much for tonight.
Thanks for doing this, Bullcat.
Yeah, we get to do some different stuff than's been on some of the others, and it'll be great catching up with Daryl as well. And I think in that one, we'll kind of get into more of how you guys are as adults with him living on the West Coast. It can't be easy sometimes. And, Daryl's had a bit of a different journey than you have.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
He's kind of a new world man from that perspective. And doesn't really seem to have the same. His passions have shifted. Let's put it that way. They're more into. He hasn't been involved in coaching and all that kind of stuff. You are very much a lot like a lot of the Brock guys are into educating and coaching others, and then there's a few of us that are bit by more of that entrepreneur performer bug where we've got our own business, although you've had a stint of doing that as well. But
I definitely like what I get out of coaching is, excuse me, when I coach, obviously I want to coach in the fundamentals and how to play the game of baseball, but I focused a lot on life lessons as well too. And, how it wasn't always about whether you win that game or how do you win the battle in life and whatnot. And you always got to do things the right way. I've had some coaches work with me in the past that they always want to do these little trick gimmicky plays and things like that to try and get one more run. I wouldn't do them because to me, that's not what baseball's about. So, over the years, I've gotten some really good gifts from the kids. They put a book together for me, and all the kids wrote, something about what coach taught them. And the best part of it is most of them they weren't talking about how to hit or how to, throw or anything like that. It was about, the life lesson stuff. So, to me, that's what's rewarding in the whole thing. And I'm sure once the boys are, out and off to school and on their own, I'll probably get back into it in some form. But yeah, it's a good feeling to know that you actually made a connection and it wasn't just on the field stuff. So,
well, I think, you telling that Gramps Stone, I think Gramps Stone would be very proud of the fact that you dropped the elbow in a place where the guy wasn't expecting it.
He would definitely, yeah.
And I say all the time, I know I had lots of conversations with Ted Stone after Brock, and it always warms my heart that he would have loved. I mean, I think he would have loved the way that you and I turned out. We're pretty fiery, not fun to play against. I wasn't really tons of fun to step into a batter's box against, mostly because I genuinely loved throwing really inside and watching people feel uncomfortable about that. But also with a sense of right and wrong on the field. I think it brings us all around the 360 of this. The game that you're thinking about where there was 4 bunts back to back to back was actually us doing it.
Oh, that's right. Yes.
Yeah.
And I was sitting near Gramps.
And Grant, that caused Ted Stone to quit as the Oshawa pitching coach. Although he came back to I will say this, he came back to coach one game that I started after that. That was the last time he ever appeared coaching in the Oshawa Junior program.
I do remember that. He got up and walked off the bench.
Right and it was because our coach, who we've mentioned before, and I don't want to, because Troy had his own strengths, but saw that I think we were playing Leaside or Thornhill. They couldn't field the bunt, so he just kept calling it. And to say that Ted Stone did not appreciate that gesture, I thought Gramps was going to wind up and throw a 90-mile-an-hour fastball. At that time, he had to be in his late 60s or early 70s. And it kind of disgusted all of us, really. That's no way to win a game.
Yeah.
Win with honor. And I think that is something that you embody on the field. You're tough to play against, but you do it in a way that people can look up to. And I hope, being a graduate of that same coaching tree and of those same players, the same Derek Minnix used to talk to me all the time about what was right, what was wrong. Chad Stone, the same. What pitch to make, what pitch not to make. What do you do? Don't show up people that you strike out, that kind of stuff. I hope that we brought a little bit of that to the Brock team, and a little bit of grit. I always think of us as the sandpaper on the team. So it's good to see that you're still grinding it out there, Mr. Houston. We'll see you soon. Thank you for tonight.
All right. Thanks, Bullcat.
Well, the smell